Continuing with our inverse function 4.7b, inverse trig functions. Let's say we had a arc sine of 0.8, and we want to find the sine of that, not our sine, but arc sine. And we want to find the sine of the arc sine of 0.8. These two, when it just go back to 0.8, they kind of cancel each other out in a way. The arc sine finds the theta, and when you find the theta, right, the arc sine finds the theta, and then when you find the sine of the theta, it's the exact same value, because of sine of theta is 0. Arc sine of theta is 0.8. However, we have to be careful when we deal with negatives. Positives, it's always going to go back to the original. However, with negatives, that may not be so sure. So let's try an example here. So let's say we have our cosine of our arc sine, our cosine of negative root 2. So let's think about this logically of what that is. So we want a degree in which theta, a degree in which it's negative root 2. So if we had our 45, 90, right? So we had 1 root 2. Well, we can't have that, right? We can't have a cosine of root 2, because cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And having a cosine in which there's a root 2, that would mean that it had to be a root 2, negative root 2 over 1. And that makes it so that the hypotenuse has to be less and the adjacent is more. And the hypotenuse is always going to be the longest value. So you cannot have a cosine that will result in negative root 2. You can have a secant. You can have a secant. You cannot have a cosine that equals negative root 2 or root 2. So this is impossible. So whenever we have a sine function or a cosine function, and they just happen to be greater than 1 or negative 1 in that way, the value is greater, that just cannot happen. Let's try another example. Okay, so let's say we are given now the cosine of the arc sine of 1517. Always draw a picture to try to see what we are working with here. Okay, so that means the sine value, right? The sine value had to have been 1517. That means my opposite had to be 15 and my hypotenuse had to be 17. And this, if you use Pythagorean theorem, or if you recognize this as a special triangle, this is a 8, 15, 17. Both methods will give you the fact that it's 8. So now my theta says, okay, what is the cosine of this angle? Well, the cosine of this is 8 over 17. let's try one more. Let's say we want to find the cosecant of the arctangent of negative 55 over 48. Okay, so let's draw my triangle here. We got negative 55. So I'm gonna guess that my triangle is gonna be, my tangent is negative. So my tangent is negative in either the, it's positive in the first and second, but it's negative in the second and fourth. So I'm gonna put my triangle in the fourth quadrant. Just gonna draw it as this. I could draw it in the second quadrant and it will give me the same answers. So here, I'll say this is my theta here. My tangent is negative 55. So my opposite over my adjacent, so it's negative 55. Then I'm going to have negative 55 go down and 48 this way. Now to find my hypotenuse. So 48 squared plus 55 squared equals c squared. Punch that in. 5329 equals c squared. My c value is 73. So my hypotenuse is 73. Now I just need to find the cosecant of this angle. This last part, find the cosecant. My cosecant is my hypotenuse over my adjacent. So that is 73 over negative 55, or negative 73, 55, like so.